Who is Israel? Israel is the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We see the direction of God's redemption plan when he calls Abraham, promising to make him into a great nation. God narrows his focus and concentrate on one group of people, but the ultimate goal remaining the same, to bless all the peoples on earth and remove the curse from creation. Genesis 12 verse 1-3. Now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you." Genesis 22 verse 18. In your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. Israel is the name God gave to Jacob. Jacob is a son of Isaac and Rebekah. Jacob was the twin brother of Esau. Genesis 25 verse 21-26. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea. And Rebekah his wife conceived. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two people shall be separated from your body. One people shall stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Esau was the oldest, he came out first. Genesis 25 verse 29-34 told us that Jacob bought Esau's birthright for a pot of stew. Genesis 32 verse 24-28 also told us that Jacob wrestled with God and his name was changed to Israel. It came to refer to all his descendants. Collectively, the descendants of Jacob's 12 sons were often called the sons of Israel, the house of Israel, the people of Israel. Isaiah 2 verse 5. O house of Jacob, come and let us walk in the light of the Lord. 2 Samuel 7 verse 23. And who is like your people, like Israel, the one nation on earth whom God went to redeem for himself as a people, to make himself a name. Jeremiah 31 verse 1-40. God's love for Israel is revealed in many ways. An everlasting love. In verse 3, God himself declared that his love for the nation Israel is everlasting, despite the fact that he has judged them. In verse 2, Israel weeping shall cease. In verse 15-17, God comforted weeping Rachel, herself a symbol of Israel, assuring her that in the end time her children would return to her. A new covenant. In verse 31, God promised that he would make a new covenant with the house of Israel. At its consummation, the members of this nation will experience a loving personal relationships with God. They will be forgiven of all past nation sins. Verse 34. God pledged that Israel would never be totally destroyed, nor would he ever abandon them. In verse 35-37, thus, despite New Testament events, God never has and never will cast off Israel. Romans 11 verse 1 and 2. The New Testament directly confirms this. God's will, in the future, is to re-establish the nation of Israel. Jerusalem will be rebuilt. It will be holy and dedicated to the Lord. Verse 38-40. God says it shall yet to come to pass. That makes it certain. Israel needs the gospel. Romans 10 verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they may be saved. In the Old Testament, Israel was invited to salvation. Isaiah 1 verse 18. In Isaiah 1 verse 3-15, God declared that the Israelis too were sinners, despite having been chosen in Abraham, as is all mankind. Isaiah 1 verse 15. God says as a result of their sins, he will not hear their prayers. Isaiah 1 verse 16. God exhorted them to repent of their sins and be cleansed. In verse 18 of Isaiah 1, God promised them total cleansing and forgiveness. Verse 19 of Isaiah 1, God pledged that if they repented, their blessings at his hand would continue. In the New Testament, Israel is still invited to salvation, which is for the Jew first and also for the Greek. Romans 1 verse 16, the gospel, the good news, is God's power to save people. The gospel is able to save everyone who believes. The Apostle Paul showed an earnest desire for Israel to be saved. Romans 9 verse 1-4. He prayed for Israel's salvation. Romans 10 verse 1. In Romans 10 verse 11 and 12, Apostle Paul declares that any Jew or Gentile will be saved if he or she calls upon God through Christ. In Romans 11 verse 1, Apostle Paul stated that God had not cast away Israel, affirmed that Israel as a nation would at some future time turn in faith to Christ. Romans 11 verse 26 to 28. Israelites were God's covenant people, and God promised to keep his covenant with them if they obeyed his commandments. Deuteronomy 28 verse 9 and 10. Someday, according to the Bible, after the struggle and tribulation of this age, the Jewish people will at last find their long-awaited rest. Isaiah 11 verse 6 to 12. 12. He will set up a banner for the nations, and will assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth.